Welcome to episode 118, and today I'm joined by David Werdiger, who helps family enterprise navigate intergenerational transitions and make good decisions together. And David refers to now being in his third career as a family enterprise advisor. He's a best-selling author on wealth transition, an experienced non-executive director, a second-generation family member, and a family office principal. Welcome, David.
Aaron, 118 episodes.
I know, it always sounds weird when I say it too.
Yeah, I want to be there for number 200, make a big party.
Cool, I'll make a note and we'll have a reunion. So
yeah,
you'll have your next book by then.
Probably. But thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to have our chat today.
No, excellent. And I'm really excited as well because I think that we're talking today about the emotional relationship between a founder and their business. And, that's a topic that's close to my heart as well. But before we get there, can you give a bit of an overview of your background and your current business?
Sure. Okay, so let's do this quickly. Grew up around a business family, worked in the business when I was a student, when I was a kid, actually. And but finished university and for a number of reasons decided not to join the family business. It was available to me, but I just didn't want to. It's a long story. So in my first career, I got a job for a stockbroker off my own bat, first job I applied for. And I was developing real-time stock market information systems, and then I was a quant analyst. That was fun, but the experience of working 9 to 5 on a job didn't resonate. I wanted to be in business. That's what I grew up around. Second career, start a business. It starts off as one of these own-a-job businesses. Then it pivots into telecommunications billing and becomes a product. And that leads to starting 2 other telco businesses and partnering in 2 others and in parallel joining some non-profit boards. Yes, I had a fair bit on my plate at one time, and that had its costs to me in terms of time and health. Eventually it caught up with me. So over that journey, learned a lot about business, learned a lot about strategy, about governance, about non-profits, about families, about, a lot more about intergenerational issues and what other families were doing and how I could be applying that in my own family and other families. Eventually did a Masters of Entrepreneurship. At the time was dealing with a significant health issue as well that had me questioning what my life would look like. And what I came up with was that I was already on a journey in my business to step back operationally. And we're going to talk about that whole emotional relationship shortly. I decided I didn't want to be an owner-operator of business till the day I died. I was very conscious about the importance of how I spend my time. And what I decided was I wanted to apply all of the experience I'd developed around business, around owner-led businesses, family dynamics, intergenerational issues, and become a consultant and use that experience to help others on a similar journey. So I wrote a book, launched my career as a consultant, and that's what I've been doing for about the last 8 years. And that allowed me to sort of reframe things in hindsight and say, okay, well, that's my second career, technology entrepreneur. This is my third career. Start to clear the decks of the second career. I've got one business left. It takes up 10% of my time. As far as I'm concerned, that's a win. It's a growing business. And I love doing the stuff that I do with family business, with family enterprise, family office, and owner-led businesses. So that's my passion. That's what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea that, you can have these 3 careers, but still have done so much in that entrepreneur and owning a business space. And, with all that experience, could you tell us a bit more about your experience with yourself and with others in terms of that emotional relationship that a founder has with their business? And is it a positive or a negative or somewhere in between?
But the way I describe it, and my wife and I have children, but when you start a business, it's like having a child. And when you have biological children, it's an act of creation between you and, you might say, a co-founder. And when your child is in its infancy, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and the child is screaming. When your business is in its infancy, it's the same. It keeps you up at night.
Yep.
Your child grows up and hopefully your business grows up. And I was on that journey, going from owning a job to owning a business. But when you're owning a business, suddenly everything changes because you're responsible for others in the same way you're responsible for another child. And your biological children compete with each other, if you've got more than one, for your attention. And your business child competes with all of them for your attention. So I think thinking about it in this way, your biological children eventually grown up. Some of ours are grown up now and married and got their own families. Your business child hopefully grows up. And with each of them, you've got a relationship. They're a part of you. They're part of your identity as a parent. The business is part of you. It's a reflection of your own identity. And I talk about that in the book. And you have a relationship with it. It's you. And I sort of was thinking about this because I decided very consciously that I'm not wanting to be an owner-operator my entire life. How am I going to go on this journey? And it was inspired by, I'll tell you exactly what it was inspired by. It was inspired by this prospect many years ago who said to me, look, I love your system, but what happens if you get hit by a bus? And I said, oh, shit, he's right. If I get hit by a bus, the business is nothing. How can I make this business something without me? And this is, again, the owner business model of Kiyosaki. The business and the other very influential book for me was E-Myth from Berger, or Gerber, sorry. If you want to create something that's of genuine value, that's an asset, obviously it has to be profitable and generating cash, but it's got to be worth something without you. Because if it's not worth something without you, it's not worth anything for anybody else. And that's the true test of an asset. Got to be worth something to somebody else. So I set my heart, yes, because part of it is an emotional thing to say. I set my heart on making this worth something for somebody else, but that means at some point I've got to let go of it.
Yep.
And I've got to go on that emotional journey. And now going back to biological children, when the day our children got married, I'm full of joy. But, oh, God, they're leaving home. And we're fortunate that our children lived at home until they got married. But the day after, I feel something's not there anymore. It's a sense of loss and joy at the same time. And when I work with owner-led businesses on exit readiness, I'll do the usual stuff without, the operational stuff and the financial stuff and the accounts and arm's length and all of these other things that you need to do when you're a business owner. But I'll also work on the emotional stuff with them, because if the day after settlement, the business owner has a big hunk of liquidity in their account and a matching hole in their heart, that's not success. So that side of things is really important, and I think it's integral to the business founder journey.
Yeah, and I think that for a lot of people, business owners, you put so much into your business as you do your children. You're quite right, and most small businesses, whoever owns the business is the face of the business, and I'm no different in my business, and other business owners that I speak to. Everyone talks about, well, you got to get to a point somewhere down the line where you actually make it about the business and make it not about you. But I think that's where that emotional connection comes in, doesn't it? Because that's the first point on that journey to I've actually got to let this go a little bit.
Yeah, and they're all tied together. When I made the general manager a CEO and I started an advisory board. And the person who took over, he was a very successful CEO in the business because he understood what it was like to be CEO for a 100% owned business.
Yeah.
And we really had that rigor of the advisory board. But I kept saying, you're the face of the business. Now, a lot of our customers still saw me as that, and I pushed back against it because I wanted to empower him. We actually had a fantastic working relationship because we would play off each other. And people would come to me as owner thinking I was the decision maker. And technically, no, sorry, legally I was. But then I would say to them, no. Talk to the CEO, because I've given him his KPIs. And if I override him, then he's not doing his job. I've got to let him do his job. He said the best thing to me. He said, don't buy a dog and bark yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it.
And I love it because, I'm hiring him to do the job. Now I've got a fantastic team. I had a fantastic team then. Now they're even better. And the business is not revolving around me. It's got a life of its own. They're the key people they talk to. And I changed my title over time. It was managing director. Then I called myself just chairman. I called myself chief evangelist. I think Bill Gates used that title at some point. And the face that you present to the outside world as owner, and I'm no longer 100% owner either. The team members are owners, and I think that's really important for them to be aligned and for them to be rewarded in that way. If they're prepared to act like owners, I'm happy for them to be owners.
Yeah.
And it means that the business is far more than just me. I'm very proud of what I started. And at some point, it might end. I'll sell it. And I can look back at it and say, and every time we have these team lunches, which we do more often now because so many of them work from home, I'm just full of gratitude to the team because in the early days, it was really hard. I'd hire somebody and I'd say, oh, shit, I could do their job better than them.
Yeah.
I could do every job in that business better than anyone. There's just one small problem. There's only one of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Your business can never scale that way. And what you were saying then about having that CEO, and this is a common issue that I see because cognitively, everybody knows I need to hire a CEO and then I step back. I can't still be doing the CEO's job while I have a CEO. However, in practice, I see that happen a lot, that the owner is still doing the CEO's job. So it naturally doesn't work. And they think, well, that CEO wasn't right now. I need to go and get another one. Whereas actually, it probably wasn't the CEO. It's just the owner themselves hasn't really detached themselves emotionally and gone, okay, I need to move on. So what tips do you have, if you have any pieces of gold, as to how do people get to that point where they can actually and will step back, even though they know they have to? How do you actually make it happen?
Yeah. So after I appointed the CEO, I put a sticker on my door and said, and at the time I had 3 businesses, and I put for each of the businesses what my role is: billing bureau, non-exec director. Okay, that was sort of like sending a message to the staff to say something's changed. I did a master's. That was really good. I did a master's of entrepreneurship. We set up the advisory board. I said to the CEO, because previously things were getting dysfunctional between myself and the previous GM. We were stepping on each other's toes, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. The advisory board was fantastic because that was essentially, it functioned as a channel for my creative energy into the business. And I had to reframe that as 100% owner at the time, but notionally non-executive, choosing to be non-executive. So when I would go to this CEO with something, he'd say, fuck off, let me do my job. Maybe not in, but I said, yes, do that, push back. Okay. Don't let me step on your toes in the way I was previously doing with the previous GM, because that was not working. Those monthly advisory board meetings were fantastic because they enforced a discipline to say, okay, if I've got something to do, to think about, I'd say, Paul, what do you reckon about this? And he says, this is something for the advisory board.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
So what it did is it allowed us to separate the day-to-day from the monthly strategic big picture stuff. And that monthly stuff, that became my channel into the business. Rather than, you've got to replace it with something.
Yes.
You've got to say, what are my levers into the business? Can't go cold turkey. So that's where the advisory board was so helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Thank you. Now, we talked about your book. It's called Transition, and you can show it on the screen to those who are watching on YouTube. And we'll put the link into the show notes as well. And one of the key takeaways stated with the book is that as a reader, I will learn how to better communicate and connect with the other generations involved in the family business. So, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, communication. And I did a fantastic course on communication with a woman, Claire Mann, who wrote an excellent book, funnily called Communicate, or something like that. But communication is the most important thing. When I work with family enterprise, and I use that term very broadly, I sort of say, what are we doing? We're building a castle. You know, a castle is something that you want to endure forever. A business, it can come and go. You know, you can own a business, you can start a business, you can sell a business. On the other hand, family is more than just operating business. You know, family wealth, and I'll use that in the broadest term possible, not just financial capital, but other forms of capital, is something that can endure. And if you want to build something that endures, you've got to have a foundation. And there are three things that are part of the foundation. And the first one is communication. I've seen many families, they don't communicate. And not communicating is worse than anything. Okay.
Yes.
I've seen other families, they don't over communicate, but they say what they think. And I remember I was facilitating this board meeting for one of the families I work with, family business, and they are full on saying it all, and I'm sort of juggling and making sure the voices are heard. And afterwards they say to me, you must think we're terrible. And I said, you guys are fantastic. Because you're so passionate. You're talking. You're so passionate about the business. You know, there's this thing called a fake harmony in businesses. Oh, no, we don't talk about that. Nothing to see here. Move on. Or, you know, all about external perception when internally they hate each other's guts and can't say what they want to say. So communication is the very basis of the foundation. Learning how to communicate, how to listen, how to approach communication with curiosity. That's the most important thing. These days, in a polarized world with social media, everybody rushes to assumptions, which are usually negative. So good communication is about listening, and it's about questioning. What did you mean by that? Not, you bastard. You know, taking all of that loaded thing, assumptions, when somebody said something that triggers you and you're saying, oh, you know, this must be what they're talking about. Hang on, ask what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Clarify it. It's not rocket science, but it's a skill like anything, and it's a skill that can be learned and therefore can be taught. So I can't overemphasize the importance of communication as the foundation. And that means regular meetings, structured meetings, and having them facilitated sometimes helps by having an external in the room to balance the dynamics of the room.
Yeah, just another viewpoint, because it can be hard when you're in your own situation. When you're inside, it's hard to see what's going on. But I love that you've clarified communication is not just talking; it's actually coming at it from curiosity. You know, being open-minded and trying to understand it, and that's really where we get successful communication, isn't it? Rather than we're just talking to each other.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Communication is not me telling you what I think.
Yeah. Be good if it was.
Be terrible if it was. And unfortunately it is. When it is, it's terrible.
Yes, that's true. So if I have a growing business, what would be your top tips if I haven't really thought too much about succession planning and exiting and, you know, what happens in the future? What are your top tips for that kind of business?
If the bottom level is communication, the next step up from that is shared values and purpose. And the next step up from that is governance. And governance in a business, in a family, is about decision-making processes. And so, you know, when I set up that advisory board, that was a revelation, because it allowed us, you know, as you said before, stepping back, allow you to step back from the day-to-day. And so that was, as the business grew, if you want your business to be more mature, and again, drawing on that child analogy, if you want to work on the business rather than in the business, the channel to do that is advisory board and board.
Yep.
And there's lots of ways to do that, but it really allows you to step back from the day-to-day, to look at the big picture. How are we tracking on our strategic goals? That means, assumes you're doing some strategic planning. But that's not, first you've got to do the planning, and then you've got to say, well, what is the channel for which we monitor it? It's not weekly, monthly, and sometimes quarterly is the ideal cadence.
Yeah.
So, meeting cadence, establishing a bit of rigor around meetings. They don't have to be, formal, very formal, but they have to have sufficient formality to achieve what you want them to achieve, which is quality decision making.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, because particularly when business owners have come from some kind of corporate background, the idea of regular meetings can feel very restrictive. But actually, it's about having a purpose to those meetings, right? Not just doing them because they're there. So, look, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I know we've only sort of touched the tip of the iceberg. So, for those that want to know more, then get in touch with David and get a hold of his book as well. So on that tone, what's the best way to get in touch with you and follow your content?
LinkedIn is pretty good. I'm pretty easy to find there. Fortunately, there's not a lot of people with my name in the world. So if you go to davidwerdiger.com, you'll find me as well.
Nice.
But I post a fair bit on LinkedIn. That's my favorite place, and publish a newsletter for the last few years as well on family related stuff. So that's really the best way to find me.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll put the links to that in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining, David. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Karen. This has just been made my day. I really enjoyed sharing with you.
Excellent. Thank you. And for those listening, if you received value from this episode, I'd love it if you could leave a rating or a review over at Apple Podcasts or Spotify, so someone else can also find the episodes to help with their business. Episodes are released on Mondays, so click the subscribe button and you'll be notified of when that's available. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you have any feedback, questions, or ideas for future episodes, head on over to amplifyhr.com.au or connect with me on LinkedIn and we can start a conversation.